So Justin was going to call in, but we decided maybe a little more challenging. So I'm going to take his slides. So if I get something wrong in the program itself, sorry. So yeah, we're going to talk about heat pumps today from the standpoint of program Franklin Energy has been running for the last few years. Just looking at some data from the last year and a half. Talk about what worked, what didn't work. Before we get into it, show of hands, who knows what NMEC is? Okay, we have one. Normalized metered energy consumption. Okay, one person. All right, so that gives me a little more context. All right, so yeah, and we're gonna, at the end, we'll have some time for questions, but please, if I'm moving too fast or if I lose somebody, it's late afternoon, our brains are all tired, so just raise your hand, we can answer some questions. All right, Justin Keldson and Melina Corona are folks at Franklin Energy who've been running this program for the last few years. I want to mention one other person who's not up here, Sandy Fischler-Lowy, who some of you may know, Energy Solutions. She was at Franklin before this, and without her, we wouldn't have a fuel switching program. It would have been just, a lot of the same old measures. So I want to acknowledge her because, yeah, without her, it wouldn't exist. Next slide, please. All right, I'll do my best to give the Franklin pitch. So Franklin's a large company. They operate in almost all 50 states, some programs in Canada as well. I think 40 offices and about 1,100 employees. They've partnered with AM Conservation, which provides a lot of the, the aerators, the light bulbs, a lot of the stuff that gets installed. So from that standpoint, they have, they have somebody who's got this stuff on hand for them at all times. Do a lot of programs, I think 150 utility clients at the current moment. PG&E is one of them. That's the program I'll be talking about today. Yeah, so that's Franklin. Next slide, please. All right, you can advance beyond that one. So I just want to talk about the program a little bit. So what is NMEC? NMEC is normalized metered energy consumption. Basically what that means is we want to be able to look at somebody's energy consumption over time and compare year on year, their energy consumption to calculate savings so that we're not skewing the data with things like temperature, or more recently, we now do adjustments for non-routine events like COVID. The war in Ukraine had an impact on natural gas prices. That impacts people's energy usage, things like that. So the idea being we want to be able to accurately measure people's savings over time when we have all this other stuff going on. The weather does what it does. We have non-routine events to account for, et cetera, et cetera. So first step is just collect people's usage. So we need about a year prior to some intervention we're doing, swapping out an AC, whatever. We're going to build a model, which is based off that energy consumption, as well as temperature and a bunch of other parameters. There's different things you can include. And then after the intervention, let's say we swapped out an AC unit with something more efficient, we're going to measure that energy usage, predict what they would have used otherwise, the counterfactual, normalizing to all these other things. And that difference, that counterfactual is the normalized savings. So it's not just looking at your bill from last year and your bill from this year, what is the difference, but we're adjusting for other stuff that's going on. Did I lose anybody yet on that? Does that make sense? Okay, next slide, please. So this pay for performance model, where we're getting paid on people's actual savings, that's sort of the reason we're doing this, right? Has been going on since 2018. Build It Green, when I worked there way back. That was the Cool Savers program. I don't know if anybody remembers that. Probably not, because I think we got about 1% of the homes that we had targeted. Sorry. That was in a bunch of different climate zones. It was a sweepstakes program, and we were doing AC replacements, furnace replacements, all that kind of stuff. 2020, pandemic kind of blew everything up. We can't go to people's homes, so we rolled out the Home Energy Rewards program, which is basically fill out a survey online. How many bathrooms do you have? Send you a bunch of aerators, LEDs, and stuff in the mail. So very low touch program, especially in a saturated market like California, and everybody's got LEDs already. But and we did that. That was about 10,000 customers, so much larger but lower touch program. At the same time, we also merged some older programs into what we're calling comfortable home rebates. So we had kind of two pathways. The maintenance pathway was old AC quality care, if anybody remembers that one. So coil cleaning, HVAC assessment, that kind of stuff, old PG program. And then the improvement pathway, which was much deeper savings, so AC swap outs, deeply buried ducts, duct insulation, general and sealing, a whole bunch of different measures. So those kind of two pathways. And that came out of AHUP, Advanced Home Upgrade, if people remember that one. All right, so flash forward to 2022. We decided we want to move this more to a fuel switching arrangement. We don't want to be swapping out old furnaces for marginally new, just kick the can 20 years down the road kind of thing. So we closed Home Energy Rewards just because that was kind of, we're kind of tying that up anyways now that COVID's over. We limited it to the Central Valley because we recognized that getting reliable savings in the Bay Area was challenging. So let's just focus on the low-hanging fruit. And then we kind of moved into two different new pathways. One being like, okay, if you don't want to swap out, if you don't want to fuel switch something, you at least got to do a minimum number of deep shell measures. So deeply buried ducts, wall insulation. I don't remember what the minimum number of measures you had to do was, but basically tightening the envelope, doing all that kind of stuff. And then the electrification pathway, which is what we're going to focus on today as far as results are concerned, which was you had to do at least one heat pump, so space heating or heat pump water heater. A lot of folks did other stuff on top of that, but that was really the impetus of this program, was trying to do some fuel switching in a pay-for-performance kind of model. Good so far? Cool. Next slide, please. Yes, right. So we have just to kind of back up on the structure of this. So the implementer, Franklin in this case, is getting paid at a pre-negotiated rate per MMBTU, so it's fuel agnostic. And then we offer an incentive upfront to the customer to incentivize whatever they're trying to do. So we get paid for the first 2 years of that. Basically, customer gets all the other benefits, and I don't remember exactly what the incentive amounts were, but that's the basic idea. So it's a little bit riskier. We're only getting paid if they're actually saving energy. It's all up front, and that definitely caused some. Yeah, we can talk about the ups and downs of that. All right, so customer eligibility. Had to be in PG&E service territory. Didn't have to be both, although if they're only in electric territory and we're not getting the gas savings, that doesn't really help us out. We're just taking the ding for the electric. So most of them are both fuels in PG&E. Had to be single family, 2 to 4 unit complexes were fine too. They have to have lived in the home for at least 12 months because we need 12 months of baseline data to make that model. And plan to stay in for the next 2 years. That's when we're getting paid. We had a lot of customers move out. We'll talk about that from the standpoint of total portfolio performance. And they can't have participated in something like ESAP or something else in the last 12 months. Next slide. How am I doing on time? I didn't take a start time. We'll just assume we're good.
Each one of these things, we're pretty much just like letting people get through their slides and questions, and then we go on.
Okay, so these are the measures we offered. Like I said, Home Energy Rewards. Everybody got some kind of kit, aerators, LEDs, other stuff. And then like 20% of them, 25% of them got a smart thermostat if they wanted it. Comfortable Home Rewards prior to the whole electrification push, 80% were getting a smart thermostat. 40% of the customers got a time delay relay, so evacuating the cold air in your ducts once the AC the compressor is actually shut off, getting that extra cool air. A third of them got an AC replacement, and then there's a whole bunch of other stuff, furnace replacements, like I said, duct insulation, attic insulation, all that kind of stuff. And then moving to CHR electrification, like I said, there's two pathways, kind of the deep shell pathway, and then furnace and water heater swap outs. Ended up being 60% of our customers went this way instead of just doing deeply buried ducts and all that other stuff. So that was really positive. We really weren't sure what kind of traction we were going to get out of folks. So 60% of them had some sort of fuel switch for heat pump done. 60% of them also did some sort of improvement to their ducting. Only 8% got a heat pump water heater. We'll come back to that. And 4% of them did both. So that's assuming they mostly, fully electrified their home under this program, doing both of those things. And then the remainder of those measures are, there's a handful of other things that the folks did on top of that. Next slide, please. Okay, so just high level before we dig into the data, we served about 1,400 homes, and so this is just for electrification, right? So from 2022 onward. But almost 1,400 homes in the Central Valley. It was almost 1,000 heat pumps. Most of those were space heating. Only about 100 were heat pump water heaters. We paid out $1.6 million in incentives. 2/3 of that was for heat pump projects. And to date, at about just under a year project maturity as of end of July, we're at about 17,000 megabtu. And that'll more than double over the 2 years and over whatever the lifespan of these are. I mean, we hit our targets ahead of time. Next slide, please. All right, results. Next slide, please. I want to talk about who are we talking about? Again, it's all single-family folks. One interesting thing to note is 76% of our customers also had solar, which makes sense. A lot of people who want to do this work probably have solar for a variety of reasons. But that was huge, and it made modeling kind of challenging, but we can talk about that too. That second bullet, the phrasing is a little off. 97% of the battery customers, or customers that had batteries, also had solar. So that's a small number of people. Most of the people that had a battery backup also had solar, which makes sense. 6% of our customers were already all electric, so they're not actually fuel switching, but we're still getting the electric savings out of that. But the vast majority of these people are removing their gas. In some cases, propane also, we're not even getting paid for it. We don't get the propane savings because PG&E is not, But we had a few folks that did that, which was sort of interesting. 14% low income is a market rate program. Median year build is like 1984 and 1,800 square feet-ish. So maybe a little bit on the larger side for California, but this isn't all people with 3,500 square foot homes, that kind of thing. Next, 2/3 are in climate zone 13, but
Which is where?
13 is the furthest north one, so 13, 12, 11, right? Did I get that right? So like Redding, north of Sacramento. 12 is like Sacramento to like Concord, East Bay, that area. And then 11 is the southern part of, I don't know exactly where it starts, Fresno maybe. Yeah. And we had one in climate zone 4. I'm not sure how that snuck in there, but it did. So, all right, next slide, please. All right, I just want to kind of zoom out a little bit and talk about, we talked about we're using a model to predict people's energy usage. It's not perfect. So the thing I want to mention up top is just this is a portfolio level program. Our savings are most defensible at the portfolio level. Knowing exactly how much someone saved at an individual level is subject to a lot of sources of error. So while we'd love to be able to unpack the variance from everything else, COVID, economic changes, people moving in or out, having children, all this other stuff, we can't account for all that. So there's a limited amount to which we can really say, why people's energy change at the individual level. But law of large numbers, we have a lot of folks in the program, we can get more and more confident on average, what we're doing is working or not. The other thing I want to mention is this is a huge spread. So even if we're not that confident on an individual level, we have people all over the place. We have one customer who they're exporting 10,000 kilowatt hours of solar to the grid net every year. We have another customer who is using 3,000 therms a year, which is 8 times the average for this area, all over the place. So yeah, you don't know what you're going to get. We have a recipe, but sometimes it leads to negative savings. We got a lot of folks who, for whatever reason, whether it's a modeling issue or whatever, that's good folks on both sides. But on average, you can see our little average here. That little dot, we're in the positive, so that's good, I guess. Next slide, please. All right, so I'm going to, like I said, mostly going to talk about just our fuel switching customers. Again, around 1,000 folks. This plot here is your, energy normalized. So it's all MMBTUs, not kilowatt hours and therms. For scale, annual savings on average for all of our customers, anyone who did either a heat pump water heater or space heating. On an annual basis, those two things look very different in terms of when people are saving energy, right? Because you're not heating your home in the summer. But it's mostly space heating anyways, so just ignore the gas in the summer. That's basically our heat pump water heater folks. So our site savings on average annually was about 21 megabtu, which ends up being around 210 therms. We also got peak savings out of this, which was kind of a nice bonus. Even though we're electrifying space heating, we're doing some other stuff, and we're probably increasing the performance of the the cooling itself. So we got a little bit of peak savings, which is nice because we were getting paid more for that. We did increase the electric load in the winter, obviously, but it's somewhat marginal, about 600 kilowatt hours a year on average. You can see that blue in the winter months there.
Just so I can make sure I understand.
Yeah.
Orange is savings.
Sorry.
It's
Yeah.
gas savings.
Orange is gas savings. Yep.
So you saved it, you're not using it. And the blue, when it's below the zero, that was consumed energy because your fuel switched in the wintertime. But the blue goes positive in the summertime, like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 10.
Correct. And if you can see it, the black there, that's just peak. So everything blue is basically non-peak. So in the summer, that's outside of the 4 to 9 window, and all the time in the winter.
Okay. There's a lot of gas savings there, is what I see. It's like just.
Yep. Yeah, and that's what's really driving this program was, we know we're going to incur additional electric, but it's on a per mega BTU basis. So, if we save whatever the conversion between therms and kilowatt hours is, it's that net we're getting paid on. So, it was really, really banking on saving a lot of gas. We got a little bit of peak savings out of there too, which was kind of just a nice little cherry on top. Yeah, good so far? Question?
Are there a lot more space heating projects as opposed to water heating projects?
Yeah, it's about 90%, and I think there's a few reasons for that. That's kind of what I want to talk about at the end because I'm curious to other folks. Yeah, you're up soon, right? Talking about that kind of stuff. It's good timing. Yeah, so we had only a handful of heat pump water heaters done prior to actually pushing electrification specifically, and I don't remember what the incentive amount was, but we only did 100 of them over like a year. So it's not nothing, but we wanted more. Next slide, please. All right, zooming out a little more. This is the average savings in gas, again in orange, and blue is electric. We've also got the temperature here on the secondary axis in gray over the course of this program. People were entering and exiting this program at all different times, so the number of people that make this average changes. So there is some noise in there. You can see, especially at the beginning when we only had a few customers. But if we kind of segment the population and look at savings and like 10%, it kind of evens out. It was fairly surprisingly consistent over these 2 years if you normalize for other stuff. And you can see, where we're saving energy, especially in peak. That was a big heat wave in 2022 in early September. If people remember that, it was like 115 in Sacramento for like a week. Somewhere in here, this is Christmas this year when it rained for like a week. We had like 3 atmospheric rivers in a period of like 10 days. So like we're seeing the savings we wanted to. Also, the longer winter this winter, and even like a cold snap in May, see that pop up in the gas savings. Last year was a little bit milder towards the end. We didn't have as crazy of a June. You can see our peaks, our peak savings and overall electric savings didn't really start to take off until there's that first really hot week in July. So we're seeing what we want to see. Proof is in the pudding. Next slide, please. All right, peak savings. So on this plot, just to kind of orient you to it, on the left side, we've got in orange and red, we've got total daily savings and peak in red there, and the fraction that's peak on the right axis as a percent. Also, you probably can't see the numbers here, but I just kind of put the top 20 hottest days from the last 2 years relative to their energy savings. You can sort them either way, and it's basically the same 20 days. The thing I wanted to point out is as we're getting hotter and hotter on average temperature, our fractional peak savings is actually going down, and that's because the nighttime temperatures are hot, off-peak temperatures are hotter. During that heat wave last September, when it was 115 during the day as a max temperature, it was not getting down below 80 or 75 at night. So unless you're opening the windows and just dealing with it, you're cooling all night. So the takeaway from this is we all care about peak a lot, but in an increasingly warmer climate, where we have nighttime temperatures in the 70s or 80s, or Phoenix this year, what was it like? It was above 100 for a few days, right? There's benefit to not just doing the bare minimum for seasonal performance. We were actually getting good peak savings and off-peak savings from fuel switching, even though a lot of these folks probably had a Series 16 AC or maybe nothing too terrible to begin with. So I think like not just doing the bare minimum can really help reduce loads at night when we don't have solar and that kind of thing. Next slide, please. Other stuff we looked into, it's like I said, it's really hard to kind of normalize for some of this stuff and pull out, from the mess of customers. But we had a cash for clunkers program where we were giving people a little bit extra money for getting rid of a less than 10 SEER AC. About 25% of our customers did that. We didn't see anything significant in terms of savings there, but I think it's in there. We just can't see it in the data. We also had half of our customers go with variable speed compressors. Didn't see anything in the data, but we're really pushing that as a means of, shoulder season, increasing savings in the shoulder season and off-peak. Heat pump water heaters, we did look into this, but it's only about 100, which seems like a lot. Only 60 of them didn't also do space heating, so pretty small number of folks. But rough math, we didn't really find that we were getting quite the savings we wanted to, which is supported by like a ton of other work that we've done. We would expect like for every megabtu of electricity we add for a heat pump water heater to get 5 out in gas, right? Just in terms of like on the box efficiencies. We got like 2. And that's, again, like more in-depth studies that we've done suggest that field performance is not where we'd like it to be. Anything else I want to say on that? Everybody, money. That's what we all really care about, right? So, so at least 70% of folks hypothetically save money on their bills, although we don't actually have billing data. So, this is based on normalized estimates. The average savings was 10 or 15%. That calculus changes a lot for heat pump water heaters, which is one thing I want to talk about. But it's good to know our customers are saving money, even though we have, PG&E's peak summer rates are now like 57 cents or something like that, right? So it becomes more and more challenging to do this. Next slide, please. All right, success is we focus on the Central Valley and we got greater success, compared to previous more open-ended iterations. We exceeded our targets, and we're actually going to hit our, the targets we set like 15 months ahead of time for a relatively short program. Most of our customers saved money. Sorry, I didn't make bullet 4, so. Right. We did send some price signals to customers. We had a thermostat program, right? So we don't have a lot of data to support that we actually got peak savings out of that, but there's plenty of other studies that show that those signals actually work. And full electrification was achieved for a handful of customers, which is good. And hypothetically, if you did fuel switch your space heating, you're probably going to do the rest. So I think that's good. Next slide, please. Challenges. All right, modeling challenges first. Big non-routine events like COVID really muck everything up. We launched this program or relaunched it like right before COVID hit. So we have a baseline period of customers where their baseline is pre-COVID and their post-intervention period is after COVID. Everybody's inside, especially where we were operating in California, people's AC loads went through the roof. So our normalized savings are negative. We had to find a way, collectively we had to find out a way to adjust for those changes in occupancy and all kind of things. So it was years before we really got defensible savings from that standpoint out of that, and kind of just had to deal with not getting paid for a while. Population adjustments. Like I said, population adjustments induce some amount of variance. So, what we can actually learn from one customer is kind of limited, but we can still take big slices of the population and make some and learn some stuff about them. PV, EVs, batteries. Everybody's putting all kinds of stuff out there now that makes it more challenging to model from just what's in people's home standpoint. And data pipelines are complex. So one of the things that we found was there was no process to get gas savings from PG&E if they fully electrified their home, because their gas meter disappears. PG&E doesn't even see it anymore. If they remove their gas meter, there's no account, there's no gas account. So we're basically paying for someone's extra electricity and not getting the gas out of it. And these are our biggest saving people. So that was a challenge, just stuff like that. Yeah, next slide, please.
Is it available online through the customer's account?
It is, but if they've removed it, there's, we basically have to create like a artificial zero meter trace to get that. You can't, you have nothing to subtract from, right? Which seems trivial, but there's just not a process set up for that. So somebody, we would just not be getting gas data, but we'd still be getting electric data, and getting dinged for it.
So you can't download the gas data like before it's removed?
Yeah, so that would be used to create the model, but then the savings after it's removed, there is no gas. It just like it doesn't exist as a meter anymore. So there's nothing to calculate, right? And part of this is just PG&E. We have all of our customers. We send a list of the customers to PG&E. They pull the gas and electric meters based on those customers. They then send it over to the vendor who's doing the third-party calculations for this, the savings modeling. Then that comes back to us, and so there's multiple points in the chain where lots of things could go wrong. So maybe a couple months later, we're like, oh, this gas meter disappeared. Why is that? So well, we don't know. So yeah, lots of, and this is for a utility that they have their stuff together more than, I don't know, Beltrami Electric. I just picked one out of whatever. Nothing against Beltrami, they're great, I'm sure. But they're like 10,000 customers. They don't have the data processing in place that PG&E does. So lots of things to figure out to really streamline this, so that you don't need people like me who are like auditing the data constantly and be like, why are we missing like 300 gas meters? So anyways, just stuff to kind of work through. This stuff is kind of nascent still. Programmatic challenges, data access. To run this program, we really need to be backward looking, figure out what's working, what's not. That's why we were led to an electrification program, because we had a few customers saving a lot. We're like, well, why don't we just like throw out some of this other stuff and focus on what's working? So negotiating data access ahead of time so you can learn from what you're doing. The savings methodology should be established at the outset. We went through a whole bunch of different models as COVID hit and all this other stuff. So the output was changing over time. And that can induce some risk. It's a high-risk program, right? Because we're paying customers up front. We're not getting paid on savings for, next 2 years or whatever. Fourth one I want to touch on a little bit more. Not all measures are easiest to incentivize, right? Like heat pump water heaters are a challenge right now because we're not just removing gas in the winter and inducing some off-peak electric. We're also inducing peak electric load in the summer. So the financials of that may get much less attractive and harder to incentivize. You got to pay people a lot more if they're going to be losing money by fuel switching their their water heating.
Can I ask, was that 240 volt, like 30 amp peaks that you're dealing with in the summer, or are you getting 120 volt heat pump water heaters to play with?
So we collect, it's mostly 240. We don't collect a lot of this data because it just becomes, there's anybody who's worked in an energy efficiency program knows like issues with data quality and getting people to actually collect data is like a huge pain. So we don't have a ton of insight into what people actually put out there, which is disappointing for those of us who get to look at the data. But yeah, it's probably it's single family, so mostly 240 reams and that kind of thing. So yes, again, sorry, I'm not the program manager, so some of these are a little hard for me. Yeah, getting the compensation value right with not a lot of data to go on was really challenging. It's kind of just like, okay, like let's see what happens. Like pick a number and see if it works out. And it did. We actually did better than we thought we would. But yeah, we had to have the ability to absorb a whole bunch of negative savings when COVID hit, and also not seeing savings for a while until eventually it was like boom, like everybody's a year into maturity. Like we get a whole bunch of gas savings in the winter, and everything's gravy. Next slide, please.
Can we go back to that?
Yeah.
Previous slide about the heat pump water. I'm not sure if I follow fully why the incentives for heat pump water heater is not as attractive as the space heating.
Yeah, so this isn't specific to this program, but I think people's likelihood to want to fuel switch a water heater compared to space heating is just a lot different, just in terms of where it's incurring electric demand. So if I think that's a big reason why a lot of people may not be doing it. There's other reasons we could talk about too.
Because when you do space heating, you get space cooling also, but you don't get that fringe benefit with water heating.
Right. Yeah. So it was kind of surprising. We weren't banking on peak savings, but we got paid for it. The customers got paid for it, reducing their peak energy. But yeah, they're not getting that with a water heater.
The performance payment. You're saying that water heating, you don't get as much of that performance payment compared to space heating?
Well, we're taking a ding, even if it's structured the same way as off-peak savings. In this particular program, we actually got, for every peak kilowatt hour, or for every peak megabtu that we saved, we got paid 3 times as much. So we're incentivizing peak savings. If everybody had installed a heat pump water heater, we probably would have been cash negative because they're we're basically paying for people, to, PG&E doesn't want to not address the peak. So there's, it's a challenge for customers wanting to do this because it's more expensive for them, and it makes it risky for us. We either have to find a different compensation structure, or pay people a lot more money and hope to get paid more by utility to do this. So there's just the incentives are not aligned. Space heating, you can save throughout the year and be pretty confident you're not going to increase your bill, but that is not the case with electrifying your water heater. So,
Did they change the baseline numbers to adjust for it being electric space heating?
I say that again?
Oh, did they change the baseline quantity for electricity because space heating became electric because it's called all electric according to PG&E terminology?
I don't know the answer to that. Or are you saying that's what they did?
Well, that's what happened.
Okay, right.
Yeah, that's what they're supposed to do. That's what you can require.
If you're all electric, right?
Yeah, if you switch your space heating from gas to electric, then you can claim a much larger electric baseline quantity than if you weren't.
Gotcha. The peak rates are still pretty skewed though, right?
But let's see, it adjusts all that, and so you do better. So because your baseline quantity is so much larger.
Right.
But since Greg doesn't know, and we have to keep on moving on keep on moving.
All right, next slide, please. All right, so heat pump water heaters. I'm not going to go through all these in detail, but we know that customers aren't really pleased with the performance. We're not getting the performance back from whatever the manufacturer puts on the box. Availability on the truck, like what do we like? We like hot beer and cold showers, right? So is that right? People are less likely to take a risk with performance for water heating, right? We want hot showers. And I think some people are scared by that, even if they're unfounded fears. And there's workforce development gaps. I live in Reno, so I can't even find someone who wants to put a heat pump water heater in my house. The tech that I have in my house is like, no, please don't do that. I'm like, but whatever. That's a whole other conversation. Next slide, please. I think that might be it. All right, any other questions? Thank you.
Can you briefly elaborate on why folks were unhappy with heat pump water heaters? It mentioned sizing or installation issues. What is the nature of the?
The performance is one piece of it. So for us as an implementer, that makes it more risky if we're not getting, what we think we should out of it. But from the customer satisfaction standpoint, and it's starting to change, but in some of the projects that we've worked on, customers not getting the hot water they want just because of really long recharge times. They're noisy. I think a lot of people have maybe unfounded disappointment. But if you go look at reviews online, like I'll go to Home Depot and look at the heat pump water heater reviews, people aren't always happy with them. I know people who put them in and then a year later rip them out because they're just not functioning the way they thought, or maybe it was they weren't sized properly. This is not really specific to this program, but there is generally just a lot of, hesitation around that. Did you have a question? Yeah.
Yeah, so, this is so intriguing because it's a pay-for-performance program.
Uh-huh.
Clearly, there's a lot of savings in space heating. I expected a lot more savings for water heating. What about something like induction cooktop? You say that there was a couple of projects where they went whole home. So like the clothes dryer or the induction cooktop, those, I imagine that the savings for those appliances would be minuscule.
I think we know a guy who has done some work around this, but I think the DOE study is 8% maybe. There shouldn't. It really comes down to cooking habits. It's a really hard one to get at. It's not just you set it and the savings come out. I don't think there's much savings to be had in induction unless you change the types of pots people are using. I don't know. I'm sure Sean knows a lot more about that.
10%, 10. When we've done field studies of it, we've been able to document about closer to a 20% reduction in energy use if we have an induction stove. There's a little paper on our website that I can direct you to.
Others? Thank you.
Yay!